Wake up, wake up, wake up. The voice cut through 2.5 centuries of blissful unconsciousness like a particularly annoying alarm clock that someone had forgotten to turn off since the Clinton administration. Well, the first Clinton administration, anyway. Captain Jake Morrison's eyes cracked open to reveal a face that was definitely not human staring down at him, with 4 very worried purple eyes. 2 regular ones where you'd expect them, and 2 smaller ones positioned just above her temples like some kind of biological security camera system. Oh good, Jake croaked, his voice sounding like he'd been gargling gravel for the better part of 3 centuries. Which, considering his throat felt like the Sahara Desert had moved in and set up shop, wasn't entirely inaccurate. I was having the most wonderful dream about not being woken up by aliens. Jake, listen to me, the purple woman said, her hands still gripping his shoulders with what felt like the strength of a very determined forklift. We have maybe 20 minutes before the Dominion fleet reaches this sector. They found us. Zara. Jake blinked a few more times, trying to get his eyes to focus properly. The hibernation fog was lifting, but slowly, like a particularly stubborn morning after a particularly bad decision involving tequila. Is that you? You look exactly the same. Which is either really good alien genetics or really bad news about how long I've been out. 253 years, 4 months and 16 days, Zara said with the precision of someone who'd been counting. But who's keeping track? Apparently you are. Jake tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as every muscle in his body reminded him why hibernation pods came with warning labels about extended use. 250 years, seriously. I asked you to wake me up when the heat died down, not when the next ice age started. Zara's purple skin shifted to a slightly deeper shade, which Jake remembered meant she was either embarrassed or about to lecture him. Possibly both. The heat never died down, Jake. If anything, it got worse. Much worse. Of course it did. Jake finally managed to get himself into something resembling an upright position, though sitting was probably being generous. Controlled falling was more accurate. Let me guess. The Dominion didn't just pack up and go home after I supposedly died in that glorious last stand. Your supposedly glorious last stand, Zara corrected, and now her skin was definitely shifting toward lecture purple. The one where I had to drag your unconscious, bleeding body out of the wreckage and stick you in a hibernation pod because you were too stubborn to retreat when I told you the battle was lost. Hey, I prefer to think of it as strategically delayed regrouping. Jake looked around the cave that had apparently been his bedroom for the last quarter millennium. It was exactly as depressing as he remembered, complete with the motivational stalactites hanging overhead, like nature's way of saying your situation could be worse, but not by much. Please tell me you at least brought coffee. Jake. Zara's voice had that tone that meant she was about to deliver news that would make his current situation look like a vacation brochure. The Dominion has spent the last 2.5 centuries hunting down every human resistance cell in the galaxy. They've turned Earth into a mining operation. And now they've found this cave. Jake stared at her for a long moment, processing this information with all the enthusiasm of someone who'd just been told their student loans had been compounding interest for 2.5 centuries. So what you're telling me, he said slowly, is that I took the longest nap in human history, and I'm still waking up to the same alien invasion problem I went to sleep trying to avoid. That's actually a very accurate summary, yes. Fantastic. Jake started the complicated process of extracting himself from the hibernation pod, which involved significantly more grunting and creative profanity than he'd hoped. And here I was thinking the worst part of my day was going to be the muscle cramps. It gets worse, Zara said, which was exactly what Jake needed to hear while he was still trying to convince his legs that they were, in fact, supposed to support his body weight. Of course it does. Hit me with it, Doc. What fresh hell has the galaxy cooked up while I was getting my beauty sleep? Zara pulled out what looked like a tablet made of crystallized light, because apparently even alien technology had gotten pretentious while he was unconscious. The Dominion didn't just conquer Earth, Jake. They strip-mined it, turned the whole planet into a resource extraction facility. The few humans who escaped are scattered across 17 different star systems, living in hiding. Jake paused in his attempt to make his left foot remember how to foot. 17 systems? That's it? Out of what? 8 billion people. 3 million. Maybe 4 if we're being optimistic. Well, that's just spectacular. Jake finally achieved something resembling standing, though he was pretty sure the cave wall was doing most of the work. And let me guess, they're all looking to good old Captain Morrison to swoop in and save the day. Zara's 4 eyes developed what Jake had learned to recognize as her, "You're not going to like this" expression. Actually, about that. You've become something of a legend among the human resistance. The captain who died fighting the impossible fight, who refused to surrender even when facing certain death. I didn't die, I got knocked unconscious and you stuffed me in a tin can. Yes, but they don't know that. To them you're the symbol of human defiance. The martyr who proved that humans would rather die fighting than live kneeling. Jake stared at her. Are you telling me I've spent 2.5 centuries accidentally being dead? It was the only way to keep you safe. If the Dominion knew you were alive, Zara's skin shifted to a worried blue-green. They've been using your supposed death as propaganda. Even their greatest warrior couldn't stand against us. But if they found out Captain Jake Morrison was still breathing, every Dominion fleet in the galaxy would converge on this location. Instead of just the one that's apparently about to converge on this location anyway. That's different. That's Commander Vex. He's the Dominion's new specialist in hunting down human resistance cells. He's been systematically tracking down and eliminating every pocket of human survivors for the last 50 years. Jake absorbed this information while performing some experimental stretches that his hibernation-stiff muscles were definitely not appreciating. Commander Vex? Really? What happened to good old-fashioned alien names? You know, lots of apostrophes and unpronounceable consonants. He's actually from the same species as you. Jake stopped mid-stretch. He's human, former human resistance leader who switched sides about 70 years ago. Apparently decided that if you can't beat them, you might as well get really good at beating everyone else. A human working for the Dominion to hunt down other humans. Jake shook his head. I sleep for 2 centuries and wake up to find we've got space Nazis with a human collaborator running the show. This day just keeps getting better. There's one more thing, Zara said, and her skin was now cycling through several shades of purple that Jake was pretty sure didn't exist in nature. Let me guess, he's my evil twin? My long-lost brother? My former best friend who I betrayed in some tragic misunderstanding that could have been resolved with a simple conversation. He's the one who told me where to find you. Jake blinked. I'm sorry, what now? Commander Vex contacted me 3 days ago, said he knew I was hiding something in this sector, and that he was giving me one chance to surrender whatever it was before he came looking for it himself. And you figured this was the perfect time to wake me up and tell me we're about to have company. I figured this was the perfect time to wake you up and ask if you had any brilliant ideas about how to not die in the next 15 minutes. Jake looked around the cave, taking inventory of their tactical situation. 1 hibernation pod, check. 1 medic who'd been babysitting him for 2.5 centuries, check. 1 exit that was probably about to be crawling with hostile aliens, check. 1 legendary human warrior who'd just woken up from the longest nap in galactic history and could barely stand without assistance. Double check. Well, he said finally. I can see why you waited until the last minute to wake me up. This plan has doomed from the start written all over it. Actually, Zara said, pulling up another display on her crystal tablet. I do have something that might qualify as a plan, or at least the skeleton of what could become a plan if we're very lucky and our enemies are very stupid. I'm listening, but keep your expectations low. My track record with plans isn't exactly stellar, as evidenced by my current location and the fact that I apparently died in a battle I was supposed to win. Zara's tablet showed a 3-dimensional map of the local star cluster, dotted with what looked like tiny red warning signs. Over the past 2.5 centuries, I've been keeping track of human resistance cells. Not interfering, just monitoring, making sure I knew where they were in case this day ever came. Jake studied the map, counting the red dots. There are dozens of them. 47 active cells, spread across 12 systems. Some are just families hiding on mining stations. Others are full military units, waiting for orders that never came. Zara's skin shifted to a hopeful yellow-green. Orders from their legendary commander, who was supposed to be dead, but is actually standing right here complaining about muscle cramps. Oh no. Jake held up a hand that was still shaking slightly from hibernation after effects. I can see where this is going, and I do not like the destination. You want me to be the inspiring leader, who rallies the scattered resistance, and leads humanity to glorious victory against impossible odds. It's not impossible odds, it's just very difficult odds. Zara, the last time I tried to lead humanity against the Dominion, I ended up taking a 2-century dirt nap. I'm not exactly leadership material. You held off 3 Dominion battle cruisers with a single frigate and a crew of 12 volunteers. You bought time for 6,000 civilians to evacuate Kepler Station. And then I got blown up. You got knocked unconscious. There's a difference. Before Jake could explain exactly why that difference didn't matter when you were facing down galactic extinction, a low rumble echoed through the cave. Both of them froze. Please tell me that's just indigestion from waking up, Jake said. Zara checked her tablet. That's atmospheric entry. Multiple ships. Big ones. How big? The kind of big that makes our cave look like a very small hole in a very large target. Jake looked around their hiding spot with new appreciation for just how trapped they actually were. One entrance, solid rock walls, and nowhere to run except deeper into a cave system that probably ended in either an underground lake or a very disappointed dead end. "Okay, new plan," he said. "We contact these resistance cells of yours and tell them to run. Scatter, go deep and stay hidden until Commander Vex gets bored and goes hunting for someone else." That's not a plan, that's surrender. Sometimes surrender is the smart tactical choice, especially when the alternative is getting everyone killed by a human traitor with a fleet of alien warships. Zara's tablet chimed, and she looked down at it with an expression that made Jake's stomach drop into his boots. "Jake, we have a problem. Bigger than the fleet of warships problem. Commander Vex just sent a system-wide broadcast." She turned the tablet so Jake could see the display. "He's not just hunting us, he's using our location as bait." The message was short and to the point, which Jake appreciated even as it filled him with existential dread. "To all human resistance cells in the Kepler sector, I have Captain Jake Morrison. Your legendary hero is alive, and he's trapped. Come to his rescue, or live with the knowledge that you let your greatest symbol die because you were too cowardly to act. You have 12 hours. Jake stared at the message for a long moment. "Well, that's just perfect. I wake up to find out I'm a legend, and now I'm legendary bait." "It gets worse," Zara said, which was becoming her catchphrase for the day. How could it possibly get worse? According to the tactical display, 43 of the 47 resistance cells are already changing course toward our location. Jake sat down heavily on a convenient rock, partly because his legs were still protesting their return to active duty, and partly because the full scope of the disaster was starting to sink in. "So let me get this straight. I'm the legendary dead hero who's actually alive. Commander Vex is using me as bait to lure in every human resistance fighter in the sector, and they're all stupid enough to fall for it. Apparently your legend is very inspiring." "My legend is going to get everyone killed." Jake rubbed his temples, trying to think of a way out of this mess that didn't end with the complete extinction of the human species. "There has to be something we can do. Some way to warn them off, or turn this around, or..." Another rumble, closer this time, followed by what sounded suspiciously like landing thrusters. "Or we could just sit here and wait for Commander Vex to come introduce himself," Jake finished. "Because clearly that's worked out so well for me in the past." The next sound Jake heard was definitely not landing thrusters. It was the unmistakable whine of energy weapons powering up, followed by someone shouting what sounded like tactical instructions in a language that was definitely not Dominion standard. "Either Commander Vex has started hiring very diverse mercenaries," Jake said, "or we just got rescued by people who are about to get us all killed." Zara was already moving toward the cave entrance, her medical scanner out and sweeping for life signs. 3 humans, 2 Vorthan, 1 Klexi, and something I can't identify approaching fast. Energy signatures suggest they're armed but not hostile. "Armed but not hostile is my favorite kind of rescue party." A voice echoed from the cave entrance, young and human, and filled with the kind of enthusiasm that made Jake immediately suspicious. "Captain Morrison, Captain Jake Morrison. Sir, this is Finn Reeves, with the Kepler Resistance Cell 7, we're here to extract you." "Extract me to where exactly?" Jake called back, still not moving from his rock. "Because unless you've got a fleet hidden somewhere, we're all about to become very dead very quickly." A figure appeared at the cave entrance, silhouetted against the pale light of the alien sun. Human, male, probably in his 20s, wearing cobbled-together armor that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and wishful thinking. Behind him, Jake could see the shapes of the rest of his rescue team. "Sir, I'm Finn Reeves. I've been studying your tactical reports for 15 years. The Battle of Kepler Station, the defense of New Geneva, the miracle at Proxima 7. You're the reason I joined the resistance." Jake looked at Zara. "Please tell me this kid is not actually old enough to have been studying anything for 15 years. "He's 28, Zara whispered. "Been fighting the Dominion since he was 13. "Of course he has." Jake stood up, his joints creaking in protest. "Kid, I hate to break it to you, but those tactical reports you've been studying, they all ended with me either retreating, getting blown up, or in this case both." Finn's expression didn't waver. "Yes sir, but you always made them pay for it. Every battle, even the ones we lost, you made sure the Dominion knew they'd been in a fight." The rest of Finn's team filed into the cave, and Jake got his first good look at what passed for a rescue operation these days. The 2 Vorthan were tall, blue-skinned, and armed with energy rifles that had seen better decades. The Klexi was barely 4 feet tall, covered in what looked like natural armor plating, and carrying enough explosives to level a small city. The unidentified alien was, well, Jake wasn't entirely sure what it was, but it had tentacles and seemed friendly enough. Let me guess, Jake said. This is the crack resistance unit that's going to take on Commander Vex and his entire fleet. Actually, sir, Finn said, consulting a handheld comm device, we're just the advanced team. The other cells are about 6 hours out, but we couldn't wait. Intelligence suggested the Dominion was planning to move you before the main rescue force arrived. Intelligence from where? Finn looked uncomfortable. We've been monitoring Dominion communications. Commander Vex has been very vocal about his plans for you. Zara moved closer to Jake. There's something else. The Dominion forces outside aren't trying to break in. They're waiting. Waiting for what? For the other resistance cells to arrive, one of the Vorthans said in accented but clear English. Commander Vex wants all of you together before he makes his move. Jake sat back down on his rock, which was rapidly becoming his favorite piece of furniture in the cave. So let me see if I understand the tactical situation. We're trapped in a cave, surrounded by enemies who are deliberately not attacking us because they want to wait for more targets to arrive. The targets in question are every remaining human resistance fighter in the sector, all of whom are racing here to rescue me based on my reputation for getting spectacularly defeated in heroic fashion. That's actually a very accurate assessment, sir, Finn said. And our current resources consist of one medic who's been playing nursemaid for 2.5 centuries, one legendary commander who can barely stand up without assistance, 6 resistance fighters with improvised equipment, and enough explosives to maybe annoy a Dominion cruiser if we're very lucky. The explosives are quite powerful actually, the Klexi said in a voice that sounded like rocks tumbling down a mountain. I may have been overly optimistic when acquiring them. Overly optimistic how? They were intended for demolishing asteroid mining stations. Jake looked around the cave again, calculating blast radius and structural integrity. So if we set them off in here, we don't just kill ourselves, we probably collapse half the mountain. That is a distinct possibility, yes. Perfect. Jake stood up again, decision crystallizing in his mind like a very depressing snowflake. Because I think I know exactly what Commander Vex is planning, and it's worse than just wiping out the resistance. He's planning to broadcast the whole thing. Zara's 4 eyes widened. A public execution. Better than that. A public demonstration that human resistance is futile. He gets to show the galaxy the legendary Jake Morrison and all his followers dying together, proving once and for all that humanity should just give up and accept Dominion rule. Finn was looking between Jake and Zara with the expression of someone who was beginning to realize that his heroes might not actually have a plan. So what do we do, sir? Jake smiled, and it was not a reassuring expression. We give Commander Vex exactly what he wants, sort of. I don't like that smile, Zara said. That's the same smile you had right before the Battle of Kepler Station. Hey, that battle was a tactical success. You got blown up. I got knocked unconscious after achieving the mission objective. There's a difference. Jake turned to address the assembled group, which looked less like a crack military unit, and more like the cast of a very low-budget science fiction movie. Here's the situation. Commander Vex doesn't just want to kill us. He wants to make a statement. He's going to broadcast our deaths across the galaxy as proof that human resistance is pointless. Finn nodded eagerly. So we fight our way out and deny him the propaganda victory. No, we give him the propaganda victory. We let him broadcast our deaths to the entire galaxy. The cave fell silent, except for the distant sound of Dominion forces setting up what Jake was beginning to suspect was a very elaborate execution ground. Sir, Finn said carefully, did the hibernation affect your brain? Because that sounds like you're planning to actually die. Oh, I'm definitely planning to die. Very publicly, very heroically, and very temporarily. Jake looked around the group. How many of you have studied human history? The Klexi raised a rocky hand. I have read extensively about human military tactics, particularly your species' tendency toward Pyrrhic victories and last stands. Good. Then you know that humans have a very annoying habit of refusing to stay dead when it's convenient. Jake began pacing, which was easier now that his legs were remembering their primary function. Commander Vex is counting on this being the end of human resistance, the final defeat that breaks morale and convinces everyone to give up. And you want to give him that? One of the Vorthan asked. I want to give him something better. I want to give him the death of Jake Morrison, legendary human hero, broadcast live across the galaxy for everyone to see. Jake's smile was getting wider and significantly less reassuring. What I don't want to give him is the actual death of Jake Morrison. Zara was studying her medical scanner with the focused intensity of someone trying to solve a very complicated puzzle. The hibernation technology. You want to fake your death using the hibernation pod. Not just fake it. I want to die. Very convincingly in front of Commander Vex and his cameras, and then get better about an hour later when nobody's paying attention. That's Finn paused, working through the implications. That's actually brilliant. If the galaxy sees you die fighting impossible odds, refusing to surrender, it doesn't break morale. It proves that humans would rather die than give up. And when I turn out to not be dead after all, it proves something even more important. Jake stopped pacing and looked directly at each member of the group. It proves that humans are too stubborn to stay dead even when the universe wants us to. The tentacled alien made a sound that might have been laughter. The psychological impact on Dominion forces would be significant. Their human specialist kills the legendary Jake Morrison, only to have him return from the dead. Exactly, but here's the tricky part. Jake looked around the cave, calculating distances and timing. We need to make this look real. Commander Vex isn't stupid, and he's going to be suspicious of anything that looks too convenient. Zara was already working on her tablet, pulling up medical readouts and hibernation protocols. I can modify the hibernation process to simulate death. Stopped heart, no brain activity, cellular function suspended. For all practical purposes, you'll be dead for about 45 minutes. And if something goes wrong with the revival process, then you'll be very actually dead instead of just mostly dead. I love it when a plan has no possible failure modes. Jake turned to Finn. This is where you come in. I need you to take your team and get as far away from here as possible. Sir, we're not leaving you. Yes you are. Because when I come back from the dead, I'm going to need someone to spread the word. The galaxy needs to know that killing Jake Morrison doesn't actually work. Finn looked like he was about to argue, but the Klexi put a rocky hand on his shoulder. The captain is correct. The story of his return must be told by witnesses who escaped the battle. Besides, Jake added, someone needs to warn the other resistance cells that this is all a setup. Tell them to stay away, but make sure they're watching the broadcast. Zara looked up from her tablet. There's one more problem. Commander Vex is going to want to verify that you're actually dead. Medical scans, possibly an autopsy. Can the hibernation process fool those? For about an hour, yes. After that, cellular revival starts becoming detectable. Jake nodded. Then we'd better make sure I don't stay dead longer than an hour. Outside the cave, the sound of machinery was getting louder. Heavy equipment being moved into position. The hum of recording devices being set up. The unmistakable noise of a military force preparing for a show. They're almost ready, Zara said, checking her scanner. 3 Dominion cruisers in orbit, ground forces establishing a perimeter, and enough broadcast equipment to reach every inhabited system in the galaxy. Perfect. Jake looked around the group one more time. Everyone clear on the plan. I die heroically. You escape dramatically. Zara brings me back from the dead, and we all meet up later to figure out how to turn my resurrection into a galaxy-wide recruitment campaign for the human resistance. What could possibly go wrong? Finn muttered. Everything, Jake said cheerfully. But that's what makes it a proper human plan. A new voice echoed from the cave entrance, amplified by what sounded like military-grade speakers. Captain Jake Morrison, this is Commander Vex. I think it's time we met. Jake straightened his shoulders and walked toward the cave entrance with all the confidence of a man who had absolutely nothing left to lose, which was technically accurate since he was about to die on purpose. Commander Vex, he called out. I have to say, your reputation precedes you. All bad things, of course. But still, the figure waiting outside the cave was unmistakably human, though 50 years of working for the Dominion had left its mark. Tall, lean, wearing armor that was a fusion of human military design and alien technology. His face was scarred, his eyes were cold, and his smile was the kind that suggested he'd forgotten what genuine happiness felt like sometime around the 2nd or 3rd time he'd betrayed his own species. The legendary Captain Morrison, Vex said, and his voice carried across the makeshift arena that his forces had constructed around the cave entrance. Do you know how long I've been looking forward to this moment? Let me guess. Ever since you decided that collaborating with genocidal aliens was a solid career move. Vex's smile widened. Ever since I realized that human stubbornness wasn't a virtue, it was a disease. And you, Captain, were patient zero. The arena was exactly what Jake had expected, a circle of Dominion soldiers recording equipment positioned at strategic angles, and what looked like half the Dominion fleet's senior staff arranged in viewing positions like they were attending some kind of twisted sporting event. Beyond the perimeter, Jake could see the resistance ships beginning to arrive, drawn by the broadcast that was undoubtedly already streaming across the galaxy. You know what I love about this setup, Jake said, walking into the center of the arena with his hands raised in mock surrender. It's got real gladiator vibes. Very dramatic. I bet the ratings are going to be fantastic. The galaxy is watching, Vex confirmed. Every human settlement, every resistance cell, every person who still believes in the myth of human defiance, they're all about to watch their greatest hero die. Their greatest hero, Jake laughed, and the sound echoed off the canyon walls. Commander, I think you've been reading too much of my own propaganda. I'm not humanity's greatest hero, I'm not even humanity's most competent hero, I'm just the guy who's too stubborn to quit. Vex drew his sidearm, a weapon that looked like it could punch holes through starship hulls. Stubbornness without wisdom is just stupidity, Captain, maybe. But you know what I've learned in my 2.5 centuries of experience. Jake spread his arms wide, addressing not just Vex but the cameras that were broadcasting this across the galaxy. Humans don't fight because we're smart, we don't fight because we're strong. We don't fight because we're strong, we don't fight because we think we can win. Behind him, Jake could hear Zara and the others making their escape, exactly as planned. Finn's team would be clear of the blast radius in another 30 seconds. We fight because giving up is boring, Jake continued. We fight because when the universe tells us to kneel, our first instinct is to ask or what. We fight because the alternative is admitting that the universe makes sense, and that's just depressing. Vex raised his weapon. Any last words, Captain? Just one piece of advice. Jake smiled, and this time it was genuinely cheerful. When you're dealing with humans, always remember that killing us doesn't actually solve your problem, it just makes us angrier. The energy bolt hit Jake's center mass, and he went down hard. The hibernation drug that Zara had injected him with kicked in immediately, shutting down his vital signs just as the weapon's energy coursed through his system. To every scanner, every camera, every witness, Captain Jake Morrison had just died exactly as heroically as his legend demanded. Vex walked over to Jake's motionless form and checked for vital signs with the thoroughness of someone who'd made the mistake of assuming dead enemies were actually dead before. Confirmed, no pulse, no brain activity, no life signs. The legendary Captain Morrison is dead. He turned to address the cameras directly. Let this be a lesson to every human still clinging to the fantasy of resistance. Your greatest hero just died like all the others, alone, defeated, and forgotten. What Vex didn't notice, because he was too busy making his victory speech, was that the resistance ships orbiting the planet hadn't fled. They were holding position, waiting. And in caves and hidden bases across 17 star systems, humans were watching the broadcast with expressions that Vex would have recognized if he'd remembered anything about human psychology. They weren't looking defeated, they were looking furious. 47 minutes later, after the Dominion forces had loaded Jake's body onto a transport for what Vex had announced would be a very public autopsy, Jake's eyes opened. He was alone in the transport's cargo bay, exactly as Zara had calculated. The hibernation process had worked perfectly, simulating death just long enough to fool the medical scanners while keeping his brain activity at minimal levels. Jake sat up, stretched muscles that were getting really tired of being unconscious, and activated the emergency beacon that would signal Finn's team. Then he opened the transport's communication system and sent a message to every resistance cell in the galaxy. This is Captain Jake Morrison. Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Again, Commander Vex just proved something very important to the galaxy. He proved that even when the Dominion kills us, we don't stay dead. He paused, considering his next words carefully. Here's the thing about humans that the Dominion has never understood. We don't fight because we're going to win. We fight because not fighting is worse than dying, and apparently we're too stubborn to even do that properly. Jake could hear alarms starting to sound throughout the Dominion fleet, as they realized their dead prisoner was somehow broadcasting. So here's my message to every human listening. The Dominion wants you to believe that resistance is futile. They want you to think that Captain Morrison is dead, so human hope should die with him. But I've got news for them. Jake stood up and walked to the transport's exit, which he opened with the override codes that any decent resistance fighter learned to hack. I'm not dead, I'm not giving up, and I'm certainly not going to let some human traitor with delusions of grandeur decide when the human race stops fighting. Outside the transport, he could see Dominion soldiers running toward his position, but Finn's ship was already approaching for pickup. This is Captain Jake Morrison, officially back from the dead, and I've got work to do. Vex wanted to show the galaxy what happens when you kill human resistance. Instead he just proved that you can't. As Finn's ship swooped down to extract him, Jake added one final thought to his galaxy-wide broadcast. The Dominion should be afraid, not because humans are stronger than them, or smarter than them, or better than them. They should be afraid, because we're too stubborn to know when we're beaten, and apparently, we're too stubborn to stay dead when it's convenient. Jake climbed aboard the rescue ship as energy bolts from Dominion weapons lit up the sky around them. Through the viewports, he could see Commander Vex standing in the arena where Jake had supposedly died, staring up at the ship with an expression of pure disbelief. So Finn said as they cleared the atmosphere, "How does it feel to be legendary twice in one day?" Jake settled into a seat and tried to work out the kinks in his back. Ask me again when we've actually won something. Right now, I'm just the guy who proved that the Dominion's greatest weapon against humanity is temporary at best. Zara appeared with a medical scanner and began checking his vital signs. The hibernation process worked perfectly. No cellular damage, no neurological effects. You're officially the first person in galactic history to die and come back to life on schedule. Great. Add it to my resume under special skills. Jake looked out at the stars where dozens of resistance ships were beginning to converge on their location in response to his broadcast. Though I have to admit, there's something deeply satisfying about proving that even death is just another obstacle humans are too stubborn to let stop them. Behind them, the Dominion fleet was in chaos, trying to explain to their superiors how their greatest propaganda victory had turned into their greatest recruitment tool for the human resistance. Jake smiled. It was going to be a very interesting war.